Salvete omnes! Today we're going to talk about nouns in Latin, and we will go through the 5 declensions and talk about the endings for each group. So we shall begin with the first declension. The first declension is almost entirely feminine. There are a few exceptions, but most of the nouns in the first declension are feminine. So we will use as our example today, casa, case, which is a feminine noun, of course, which means house. So we see that the base of the word, the root of the word is C-A-S, and everything after that is the ending. And so that's the part that will change as the word declines, right? As it changes its meaning in the sentence. So we go casa, case, case, casam, casa, casa, case, casaram, casis, casas, casis, case. Okay? So I was going through the singular into the plural, and we'll just go through that one more time. So the singular, casa, case, case, casam, casa, casa. And the plural, case, casarum, casis, casas, casis, case. And we notice that the vocative is like the nominative, which it almost always is. The different cases, just a really brief run through how they're used. The nominative is mostly the subject. The genitive is, as we've seen so far, mostly possessive. It can do other things, but mostly possessive. Dative, we've seen used as an indirect object, or with certain verbs, like ocurre. The accusative is the direct object. Often, we have also seen it as the object of preposition, right? Like when we're going into the house, in casam, or when we are going towards something, ad casam. The ablative can do a lot of things. We have seen it in some time expressions, and we've also seen it with a lot of prepositions, like motion within, like if you're moving within the house, in casa. If you are moving away from something, ab casa. Or if we're going with someone, right? Like cum amigo, with your friend. And the vocative is what we use for direct address. So a little bit of a tangent there, but I thought it might be nice. Now, there are, of course, some nouns in the first declension that are masculine, like nauta, for example, nauta naute, that means sailor. But we know that they decline just like any other noun. So the form is not going to change. It'll still be nauta, naute, naute, nautam, nauta, nauta, naute, nautarum, nautis, nautas, nautis, naute. It's just a masculine noun hiding in the first declension. All right, so let us move along to the second declension. So the second declension is largely masculine, although there are some neuters. So the first example that we'll look at is amicus. Amicus, like a big majority of nouns in the second declension, has its nominative ending in us. Right? So we could see that it will go amicus, amici, amico, amicum, amico, amice for the vocative. Then in the plural, amici, amicorum, amicis, amicos, amicis, amici. Now, we're going to make a special note that because we're doing ecclesiastical pronunciation, that the pronunciation of C is going to change. So if it's followed by an I or an E, it's going to make a ch sound. where the other vowels, it'll make a k sound. So this is also like modern Italian. So, and here we do see our exception. Like earlier we said that the vocative is almost always the same as the nominative, except for second declension nouns that have their nominative in us or eus, where eus will become an I and us becomes e, right? So that's where we might have expected to see amicus, we see amice. Now, of the second declension masculine nouns, there's also a very large group that has their nominative in er instead of us. And these nouns have a tiny little stem change that we'll see in the genitive singular and then all the way through. And a great example to help us remember this category is puer. Right? Puer, that means boy. So we have puer, and then it goes to pueri, puero, puerum, puero, puer. And then the plural, pueri, puerorum, pueris, pueros, pueris, pueri. So the endings are still the same, we just have a little bit of a change in the nominative singular. And because the nominative singular doesn't end in us or eus, the vocative singular is just the same, so that's kind of nice. Now we'll move on and we'll have a look at the neuter, because there are quite a lot of neuter nouns in the second declension. In the nominative, they usually, or they do, end in and the accusative singular will be to match. Now the other difference we'll see is that the nominative plural will be a, and the accusative plural will be a to match. And of course I should have mentioned that the vocatives will be just like the nominative. So it's really just, a tiny little change in the endings as we go from masculine to neuter. So we'll use as our example celum, and we're remembering that ecclesiastical Latin AE is pronounced together as a, and that this also creates the change in the pronunciation of C from K to Ch. So we will have celum, celi, cello, celum, cello, celum, and the plural cella, cellorum, cellis, cella, cellis, cella. So, and this, of course, a beautiful noun meaning sky. Now, the third declension can be a little bit tricky, but we still like it. The third declension, the masculine and feminine nouns have the same ending. So we have to memorize the gender for these nouns because the masculine and the feminine have the same form. And of course, we even know that there are some nouns in this group like comes, comites, that are common, right? So, comes, comites, which means comrade or companion, and gets its gender based on that of the person to whom it is referring. So here we go with the third declension, and we're going to use an example that shows a stem change because this is something we see quite a lot in the third declension. We got to remember that our nominative could be the same as the genitive, or it could be a stem change like we will see in our noun rex, singular, rex, regis, regi, regis, regi, rex, and the plural regis, regium, regibus, regis, regibus, regis. I don't know where I got all mixed around on that. So, as I said, masculine or feminine, all third declension nouns will have those endings. You could pick any noun, even if you're not familiar with it, and follow the form. Following this form, you would be able to decline it. Now, there is, of course, a few exceptions in the third declension, as we will very well see, because of I-stems. So I-stems, or and also now third declension nouns that end in a double consonant, will have a little bit of change in the endings when it comes to the genitive plural. These nouns, instead of having will have So a very, very small change. And it's the same, doesn't matter whether they're masculine or feminine. And we can, to illustrate this, have a look at navis. So navis is going to decline like this. Navis, navis, navi, navim, nave, navis. Naves, navium, navibus, naves, navibus, naves. So one little change. Now there are a few exceptions where it's like princes, principis, prince, which will have in the genitive plural and will also have an I in the ablative instead of an E. But for the most part, we're just going to be looking at the change from to So this is a little change. Now, third declension, along with having masculine, feminine nouns, also has neuter nouns. So for most third declension neuter nouns, I think it's really nice because the endings they're not that different. We're used to having to memorize the nominative of third declension nouns, and the nominative singular is going to be exactly the same as the nominative plural. And just as we've seen with the second declension, the nominative plural, accusative, and ablative is going to use a for its ending. So here we could take as our example noun, litus, litoris, which means shore. So litus, litoris, litori, litus, litore, litus, litora, litorum, litoribus, litora, litoribus, litora. So aside from the nominative, accusative, and vocative, which are all a matching set, the endings are really exactly the same. Now, when we come to the I-Stem of the neuter third declension nouns, we have a few extra changes. Here, we're going to have an additional I in the ablative singular, and we're going to keep the in the genitive plural that we're used to, but we're also going to add an I for the nominative, accusative, and vocative plural. So instead of an A, it's going to be IA. So here, our example noun can be mare, maris, which means the sea. Right, so we'll have a beach theme for the neuter nouns. So mare, maris, mari, mare, mari, mare, the vocative. Maria, marium, maribus, Maria, maribus, Maria. So not too different. Now, as we move along to the fourth declension, most fourth declension nouns are masculine, but there are a few that are feminine, like domus and manus. But the fourth declension feminine nouns decline just the same as the masculine. So we'll just have a look at one, and we'll know that the endings here are the same all the way, whether it's masculine or feminine. So today we'll look at exercitus, exercitus, a masculine noun that means army. So as we go through, exercitus, exercitus, exercitui, exercitum, exercitum, exercitus. And the plural, exercitus, exercituum, exercitibus, exercitibus, oh, that one kind of got my tongue stuck, exercitus, exercitibus, exercitus. Let's do that one again because it had some tongue twisters. So we'll do the singular, exercitus, exercitus, exercitui, exercitum, exercitu, exercitus. And the plural, exercitus, exercituum, exercitibus, exercitus, exercitibus, exercitus. I really like exercitibus, but it's kind of sticky out. So as I said, fourth declension nouns are going to be just the same, masculine or feminine, but they are different for the neuter. So for the neuter, we're going to see you used in the nominative, accusative and vocative singular instead of us. And for the nominative, accusative, and vocative plural, we're going to see a, just like we would expect. So for our example today, we'll look at cornu cornus, which means horn. Okay, so it will decline just like this. Cornu, cornus, cornui, cornu, 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 cornua, cornuu, cornibus, cornua, cornibus, cornua. The fifth declension in Latin is always feminine, with the one exception of the word dies, they. All other fifth declension nouns are feminine. And we today will look at our example noun, res. So res, which means matter or thing, and it declines res, re, re, rim, re, res, res, rerum, rebus, res, rebus, res. So res a lot of times. That one's actually pretty fun to say really fast. All right, and there you have it, the 5 declensions in Latin. So once you have gotten these 5 down, you are well on your way to making some great advances in Latin, because we will see in the future that the Latin adjectives largely use the same endings as the nouns. Valete!